Bless you. Good morning. Shay, if the Chiefs lose, you might want to stay home next Sunday and watch the live stream. I'm just saying. You were walking on some shaky ground there. It's good to see all of you in your Chiefs gear. I know for a fact that we have someone in Texas also wearing their Chiefs gear at church. I texted Ryan Rampton, former youth minister here, a handful of years ago, and I said, "Are you wearing your Chiefs gear?" And he said, "Well, I'm not wearing my jersey because I'm scared I'll get reprimanded by my elders." But he said, "I am wearing a hoodie that has a small Chiefs logo on it." And he said that he actually suggested during a staff meeting that they put up a Chiefs photo booth like we have here at their church, but he said that didn't go over very well. So he's representing us down there in cowboy country. It is good to see everyone this morning. Didn't Dayton do a wonderful job last week? Dayton did a wonderful job. He did such a great job carrying Matt, and because Matt needed the help. And so thanks for bringing Dayton to carry you along. And this morning, if you were able to stay if you were able to come early and go to the class, I know there were some in the early service that stayed for the class. We're doing a combined adult class down in the teen wing for the next 3 weeks, and it's all based on the book that Matt shamelessly plugged like 6 or 7 times last week. And this morning we had Ray and his wife Lorna, and they were here. Are they still here? I wasn't sure if they were able to stay or not. They did a wonderful class talking about the book that Matt and others put together. One good thing, right? One good thing. The one good thing that that different people in the community have done to make an impact. And so it's a great class, and it's a great segue into what I want to start doing today, which is talking about making an impact and what it means to make an impact and how we go about making an impact. So I want to encourage you, if you weren't able to be here today for the class, the next 2 weeks, try to come early and go down the teen wing and hear the different people, because we're bringing in people from that book that have done one good thing in Kansas City. And so it's going to tie in real well with what we're doing during the sermon time. In Acts chapter 4, Peter and John have done a lot of great things. They've done a lot of really cool things. They've done some miraculous things. They've really kind of gathered a large following of Jesus followers, and it's getting them in trouble, right? They're not doing anything bad, but it's getting them in trouble nonetheless. And so all the rulers of Jerusalem, because they're causing such a stir in Jerusalem, they call them together and say, "Hey, we want to know, like, what power do you have to do this? Like, where's this power coming from for you to go around and cause such a stir in Jerusalem?" And they're really upset with them, and basically Peter and John are on trial. And they have to give a testimony. They have to testify to this power that they have and how it's helping them to do what they're doing. And here's what Luke says, because Peter and John end up talking about Jesus, right? They want to know what power, and all they end up doing is talking about Jesus, because we know that's where the power came from. And here's how the religious leaders responded according to Luke in Acts 4:13. When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. I like that. When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men. So one of my very favorite classes when I was in graduate school at Lipscomb was a class called a Seminar in Ecclesiology. I didn't really know what I was signing up for. I knew that ecclesiology was the study of the church, but I didn't really know in what way we were going to study the church. There's lots of different ways you can go about doing that and a lot of different directions the class could take. And so I didn't know really the class catalog, the course catalog was not very descriptive. It just Seminar in Ecclesiology. The only reason I took it was because Lee Camp was teaching it, and I don't know if you've heard that name before, but Lee's written a number of books, and he had just written a book that I fell in love with, and he was a favorite professor on campus, and everybody talked about him, and so I'd never had him before, and so I was like, I want to have a class with Lee Camp just so that I can meet him and kind of sit at his feet and learn. And so I signed up for the class not knowing what to expect. It ended up being one of my very favorite courses in all of my graduate work. The way that we studied the church was we studied highly influential people throughout the history of Christianity, people that have made a huge impact in the history of the church, but not just in the history of the church, people who made a huge impact in the history of the world because of their belief in Jesus. And so we studied people that I was already familiar with, that I knew really well, that you're familiar with, right? The great reformer Luther and John Wesley and Martin Luther King Jr. and Mother Teresa. We studied all those big names that I was aware of, but we were also introduced to people I'd never heard of before. Maybe some of them I had heard of, but just vaguely, and I didn't know much about them, but others I didn't know anything about, had never heard of. So St. Benedict and Dorothy Day and Clarence Jordan, William Wilberforce and Henry Nouwen, just a lot of names. Maybe you're familiar with some of those, maybe not, but they were people throughout the history of the church that changed the world because of their belief in Jesus, that changed not just the church and the story of the church and the history of the church, but they really changed the world because of their belief in Jesus. They all had a significant impact for the better of the world because of their belief in Jesus, and in the name of Jesus, they changed the world. And I got to tell you, it was real easy for me to sit in that class and feel about this big. You know what I mean? I sit in that class and I hear about all these great people and all the things that they did, and I sat there thinking to myself, who am I? Like, what in the world do I have to offer? How will I ever be able to compare to Dorothy Day? How will I ever be able to compare to Martin Luther King Jr., to Clarence Jordan? How will I ever be able to do any of that? What will I ever do? Not just what have I done, but what will I ever do in my lifetime? And so I felt this small in class. I wondered, what significance will I have in this life? What, in this pond that we call life, what will my tiny ripple be, if there will be any ripple at all that I'll make in life? And so I just felt really, are you with me on that? Do you understand that feeling small? The truth is, and I hope that this comes across as good news, the truth is that not all of us are going to be Martin Luther King Jr., and not all of us are going to be Mother Teresa. But we also don't have to be. And I think that's good news. We don't have to be Mother Teresa. We don't have to be Martin Luther King Jr. We're not called to change the world. That should be encouraging in some way. We're not called to change the world. It should take a little pressure off of us. But, and you knew there was a but coming, we're not called to change the world, but I do believe we're called to make a positive impact in our location. And I want to emphasize the word positive because we're all going to make an impact whether we want to or not. The choice that we have is that impact that we're going to make going to be positive or is it going to be negative? And I do believe that we are called as Jesus followers to make a positive impact in our location. And what I mean by our location is right where we are, right where we live, right where we work, right where we play, in our circle of life, in our sphere of influence. I believe that we are called to make a positive impact. And what I love about this testimony that we get in Acts chapter 4 and verse 13 is that the rulers in Jerusalem realized that Peter and John were ordinary, unschooled men. And that testimony makes me feel good. I don't know about you, but it makes me feel good because a lot of times I feel real ordinary. You with me? No? Okay. All right. It's been a church full of special people who feel extraordinary. And if you do, that's great. Don't want to discourage you. But I feel pretty ordinary a lot of times. And not only do I feel pretty ordinary a lot of times, but I also feel a little unschooled sometimes. Like when Zach makes fun of the way I say certain words. I feel unschooled. Right? And so I have this thing where I'm like, I don't have any special talents. I don't have any special gifts. Like, I don't have access to the same resources that a lot of other people have so that they could have, make an impact in this world. Like, I don't have those resources at my disposal. And I don't have all the right letters at the end of my name that signify that I'm somebody special. And so I just feel like I'm, like Peter and John, I just feel like I'm a pretty ordinary, unschooled person. But yet Peter and John, being ordinary, unschooled people, made a positive impact in their location, in their circle, in their sphere of influence, where they lived and where they worked and where they played. They made this positive impact. And the reason they were able to do so is found in the testimony that we just read in Acts 4:13. It's right there in the sentence. They were able to do so because they had been with Jesus. They'd been with Jesus. That's all it took. They'd been with Jesus. I don't know if they do this anymore, but it used to be that if you couldn't get your computer to boot up and you called, like technical services, customer support to ask them, like, what's going on with my computer, the very first question they were always going to ask you was what? Do you remember what the very first question was? Is your computer plugged in? I found that to be the most aggravating question ever. Like, don't insult my intelligence. I may not be a computer engineer, but I know how to plug my computer in. Do you want to know why that was the very first question they always asked every time you would call? Because there were way more people in this world than you would ever realize who actually did not know that their computer was not plugged in when they were trying to boot it up. And it makes me think of kind of bringing that back to Peter and John. A power-filled object is only good as long as it remains plugged into its power source. Right? A power-filled object is only good as long as it remains plugged in to its power source. It sounds very simple, right? But a lot of times we forget it, which is why technical support has to say, is your computer plugged in? It's kind of like, if you've ever been vacuuming in your house and you just get a little too far and all of a sudden your vacuum cleaner cuts off on you and you turn around and look and you pull the plug out of the wall, right? A power-filled object is only good as long as it's plugged into a power source. And so Peter and John, they were able, even though they were ordinary, unschooled men, they were able to make an impact in their sphere of influence, a positive impact, because they had been with Jesus. If we are going to make any sort of impact, if we're going to make any sort of positive impact where we are, we have to start by making sure we remain connected to the power source. Jesus would say it this way in John 15. He says, I am the true vine. This is John 15, starting in verse 1. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, though, he can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be given you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. So in this text, Jesus says God is the gardener, which is very appropriate because as you open up your Bibles, the very first thing you know is that God creates a garden. And so God is a gardener. And Jesus says that what God does as the gardener is he takes these branches that aren't producing any fruit and he just cuts them off. But all the branches that are being fruitful, that are producing some sort of fruit, he prunes them back so that they can be even more fruitful the next day. So they can be more fruitful in the future. And Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. So church, who's the branches? We are, right? We are. You and I, we are the branches, the disciples that Jesus is talking to in John 15, our children, right? Generations from now, like we are the disciples of Jesus, the followers of Jesus are the branches. And Jesus says God's going to cut off the branches that aren't producing fruit. But the ones that are producing fruit, that are being fruitful, he's going to prune back so that we can be even more fruitful. It seems pretty clear to me that what God desires of his followers is that we bear fruit. He desires it. He wants us to bear fruit. He wants us to do good works. He wants us to spread his word. He wants us to make a positive impact in our location, to make a positive impact in our sphere of influence. Jesus says it this way in our text. He says, "This is to my Father's glory, that you bring good fruit, that you bear much fruit." Church, we may not be called to change the world, but we are called to bear fruit right where we are. We may not be called to be Mother Teresa. We may not be called to be Martin Luther King Jr. or Dorothy Day or Henry Now. We may not be called to be any of those people, but we are called to make a positive impact right where we are, where we work, where we play, where we live. And so the question is, okay, so how do we do that? How do we do it? Well, I don't know if you picked up on it, but there's a key word that pops up in that John 15 text that I read. It pops up over and over again. I want to read it again, a little bit of it at least, and see if you can pick up on the key word that shows up. Remain in me, and I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. Are you picking up on something here? If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit, but apart from me you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit. Did you pick up on the key word? What was it? Man, you guys can listen. You're good. It shows up 8 times in 8 verses, which is a lot for just 8 verses. Remain in me, he says over and over again. Remain in me and I will remain in you. It's this idea of staying intimately connected to the vine, of staying intimately connected to Jesus. We can't make a positive impact in our location if we don't remain in him, if we don't remain connected to the vine that is Jesus. To mix the metaphors and go back to the computer imagery, like we can't make a positive impact if we don't remain plugged into our power source that gives us power. Paul says it over and over. You've got power. I mean, he says it in a bunch of his letters. Ephesians, he even says, I wish that your eyes would be open to the amount of power that is at work within you right now. But we will not ever be able to make good use of that power if we're not plugged into the power source. If as branches we don't remain in the vine. You can't get too far away from the power source and still expect to do anything powerful. When it comes to bearing fruit, I want you to kind of go back to that John 15 text. When it comes to bearing fruit or making a positive impact, I want you to notice that there's a mutual participation here. That we are partnering with God in this, that he does this with us. We are partners with God. Yeah, we bear fruit, but the fruit that we bear is only possible because we as the branches are in the vine. And the vine gives us the life and the power to bear that fruit. And so we are connected to the vine, and God, whenever we are connected to that vine and we are bearing that fruit, then God comes and he prunes us back so that we'll be even more fruitful the next time around. Jesus says things like, no branch can bear fruit alone. Apart from me, he says, you can do nothing, right? Here's that, we got to work together in this. This is this mutual participation. This is the mission statement that we talk about all the time, joining in that work so that we can mutually participate in that. We do it together with the vine, we the branches in the vine. This is why staying connected is so important. This is why remaining in him is so important. If we're going to expect to have any sort of positive impact in our community, in our location where we are, we got to stay plugged in. We got to remain. Now, what I could do right now is I could kind of steer this sermon in the direction of saying, okay, so what does it look like to remain? right? What does it look like? Like, how do we know if we say, and I could say things like, well, we need to make sure we're staying plugged into church. You need to make sure you read your Bible more. And here's the thing. You don't need me to tell you that stuff, right? You don't need me to tell you all that. You know it. You don't need me to tell you whether or not you're connected. You know it. You know whether you are remaining. You know whether you are connected. I really believe that deep down, we all know, if we're really being honest with ourselves and we're doing a real good kind of moment of reflection, we all know deep down whether or not we are doing the things it takes to remain connected. You don't need me as your preacher to tell you what it looks like. You know. And so the question that's just kind of left for you to answer is, are you connected? Are you connected to the vine? Are you connected to the power source? Are you remaining in Him as Jesus talks about? I believe it's so much more than mere belief. It's so much more than church attendance. It's so much more than participating in some worship rituals. It's about an experience, an intimate experience that can only be known deep inside but can't really be explained. And only you know. Only you know if you are remaining connected. So, church, I want you to hear this morning that apart from the vine, you cannot bear fruit. And any branch that fails to produce fruit, the gardener, God, is going to cut that branch off. But if by remaining connected to the vine, by being plugged into the power source, if you are bearing fruit through that, then God, the gardener, is going to prune you back so that you can bear even more fruit later. Because it is to the Father's glory. It is His desire that you produce fruit. This is the word of the Lord to us today. Let's stand and let's sing.